Hello, friends. The 1,085 days of the war between Russia and Ukraine continues. Today, the main event is the conversation between Trump and Putin and the official start of peace talks on Ukraine. But let's start traditionally with the situation on the front. The Russians continue to actively advance west of Velika Novosilka, according to the deep state map. The offensive there has been going on for the second day. In Andriivka, in the Kurakhove direction, the Russians captured the street leading to the westernmost outskirts. They also advanced in neighboring Shevchenko and Udachne. Deep State wrote the day before that the Russians are trying to capture this entire salient. According to him, the settlements of Rozliv, Kostiantinople, Andriivka, Ulakli, Udachne are a priority for the enemy at the moment in order to align the line of combat clashes and regroup for new offensive actions. Russian activity is also observed much further west in the direction of the village of Bahatyr, an important logistics point for the Ukrainian armed forces on the Zaporizhzhia-Kurakhove highway. The Russians are also increasing pressure in the Zelensky area, which could allow them to put pressure on Andriivka from the south in the future. I would like to point out that such a scenario would create a threat of encirclement of the Ukrainian armed forces in the entire pocket west of Kurakhove if the Ukrainian troops do not have time to leave there. Near Pokrovsk, the Russians have advanced to Kotlyne, and the Ukrainian armed forces continue to advance in the Pishcheny area, having slightly pushed back the gray zone. The Ukrainian command's plan here is obvious to make a breakthrough here, going from the south into the rear of the Russian units, which are to the north in the Kotlyne and Udachne area, bypassing Pokrovsk from the west, and to induce the Russians, under threat of encirclement, to retreat from this bridgehead, reducing the threat to Pokrovsk. This plan is probably obvious to the Russians as well, and therefore, according to Russian military telegram channels, reserves and the Russian army are being pulled in here. And in fact, a major counter-battle is underway, on the scale of the current war. South of Pokrovsk, the Russians are trying to get closer to the borders of the Dnipropetrovsk region from the villages of Sribne and Zaporizhzhia, where they are also advancing to the west. Deep State writes that in this area, contrary to expectations, Russian troops moved not south, but west, to the village of Kurakhove on the border of the two regions. Our military telegram channel believes that this decision was made due to a gap in the Ukrainian defense in one of the recently created brigades that is defending this area. The occupation of these settlements will open up operational space for further advancement and, in general, control over a considerable area on the ground, taking a piece of territory with villages where they can gain a foothold, writes Deep State. In the Kursk region, the Russians advanced in the Sverdlikovo area at the southwestern base of the Ukrainian bridgehead. Today, Trump and Putin held their first official conversation. It was long, an hour and a half. Let's see what they agreed on. First, to open official negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. Trump designated the circle of people who will conduct them on behalf of the United States. These are Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Director of the Central Intelligence Agency John Ratcliffe, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, and Trump's Special Representative Stephen Witkoff. Putin announced his readiness to receive American representatives in Moscow for negotiations. It is noteworthy that General Kellogg, who is Trump's representative for Ukraine, is not on the list of participants in the negotiations. Earlier, Russian media wrote that he has a negative attitude in Moscow, since he is perceived there as a protege of the Western War Party. Perhaps this is connected with the replacement of Kellogg with Witkoff in the negotiating group. Secondly, they agreed to hold personal meetings at the highest level. Putin has announced an invitation to Trump to visit Moscow, which would hardly have happened if Trump had not given his prior approval for the trip. Trump himself confirmed the agreement on a personal meeting. Thirdly, the statements of both sides state a common desire to end the war in Ukraine without any contradictions being recorded so far. At the same time, Trump separately spoke in a conversation with Putin in favor of an early end to hostilities in Ukraine. This corresponds to the previously discussed schemes, according to which the United States will insist on a ceasefire, and then elections in Ukraine, and the signing of a final peace treaty. And Peskov said in his commentary that Putin told Trump about the need to eliminate the root causes of the Ukrainian conflict. By this, Moscow understands, in particular, preventing Ukraine from joining NATO. Fourth, the overall comments from both sides were positive. Peskov said that Putin supported Trump's thesis that it was time to work together. Trump described the conversation vividly. I quote, "We both reflected on the great history of our nations and how we fought so successfully together in World War II. We talked about the strengths of our nations and the great benefits that we would one day receive from working together. But first, we both agreed we want to stop the millions of deaths that are happening in the war with Russia and Ukraine. President Putin even used my very strong campaign slogan, common sense. We both believe in it very strongly. We agreed to work together very closely, including visiting each other's countries," Trump wrote. Fifth, Trump said that after talking with Putin, he would call Zelensky and inform him of the conversation with the Russian president. Let me remind you that Zelensky has repeatedly urged Trump to talk to him first and only then to Putin. But as we see, the U.S. president did exactly the opposite. At the moment, the conversation between Trump and Zelensky has already taken place. Zelensky said at the end of the conversation that Trump informed him about the conversation with Putin. He also said that they discussed signing a new agreement on security and economic and resource cooperation between Ukraine and the United States. Later in the evening, the head of the president's office, Yermak, reported that Trump and Zelensky agreed on the immediate start of work by teams to end the war. Friends, I understand that the duration of events is becoming less relevant for you, but for me, the situation is only getting worse. Those who have been with me for a long time know that preparing reports on this channel has become my main job, and I have no other job for obvious reasons. Lately, the channel has had few views, so I ask for your help. If you have the opportunity to support me with a cup of coffee, I will be very grateful. Thank you very much for understanding and see you in the next video.